The e-learning center at Prince Sultan University presents this recorded webinar titled Recommendations of Conducting Exams Using PSU Approved Official Platforms. In this webinar, we will discuss Moodle LMS tips to creating secure exams, how to use net support to monitor your exams, and how to access courses with resources that will help you build a secure Moodle-based exam. Moodle LMS. In this section of the webinar, we will discuss tips to create a secure Moodle-based exams, most of which are guidelines that you must obtain to uphold PSU standards. Tip number 1 and tip number 2 are related to each other. Tip number 1. Always place your questions within a protected Moodle exam. Moodle exam allows you to set a password that will protect your questions. So whether you are using questions such as MCQs, true and false, drag and drops, or you require an essay submission, always hold your question within a password protected Moodle exam. And you can set a Turnitin activity or assignment activity for students to submit their essays through there. This way, you make sure that all your questions are protected and will not leak outside the exam hall. Tip number 3. Hide all resources that are not required during the exam, whether they are presentation slides, books, or previous activities that you have conducted with your students. Hide them all and only keep the exam visible. It is suggested that you set open, close time for the exam and a time limit. You can set the open and closing time, which is the period of time in which your exam will be available for students, and the timer, which is the time limit for the exam. To further explain this step, I have created a short example. As shown on the screen here, this quiz will open at 2 p.m. and it will close at 3:10 p.m. However, the time limit is set to only 1 hour. This means that the exam will be available for students for 1 hour and 10 minutes. However, the time limit is only 1 hour, meaning that there is a 10 minutes grace period at the beginning of the exam. If the students start the exam within this 10-minute grace period, they will get the full hour. If they started it after the 10 minutes grace period, with each minute that passes, the time will decrease 1 minute. For example, if the students start the attempt at 2 and 11 minutes, they will only get 59 minutes to complete the exam. Going back to our slideshow for tip number 5. Tip number 5. Always set when time expires to open attempts are submitted automatically. This will ensure that when students leave the exam hall without clicking submit, or if they run out of time without clicking submit, their attempts will automatically be submitted to the system. Thus, no attempts will be lost or deleted. Tip number 6. Exam navigation method. You can set your exam to either be free navigation, allowing the students to move freely throughout the exam. They can go to the next page and then to the previous page as they see fit, or you can set it to sequential navigation, which means that once the student moves from the first page to the second page, they will no longer be permitted to go back to the first page. Tip number 7. You can randomize the order of questions between students by setting shuffle within questions to yes. And how questions behave should be set to defer feedback so that students do not receive feedback during the exam. Tip number 8. Review option must be unchecked during final exams at all times so that you ensure that students will not receive their grades on Moodle, as grades during the final exam periods are supposed to appear only on Educate. During midterm exams and quizzes, we advise you to keep these settings unchecked until you are ready to share the marks. Once you are ready to share the marks, you can check the options you wish to display to students from after the quiz is closed. You can display marks, the attempt, whether correct, or anything you feel that will benefit your students. Tip number 9. Set an exam password. The password should be at least 6 alphabetical characters long. It should be made of letters, special characters, and numbers. And make sure to never share exam password with students. Tip number 10. The password must be entered by instructors or invigilators from net support. This will ensure that the password is not distributed to people outside the exam hall. Tip number 11. Using group mode, you can create multiple versions of your exam and allocate it to each group. This will ensure that each group is only permitted to attempt the allocated exam version. You can find more information about this on the Moodle Faculty Resources course. We will display how to access this course at the end of the session. Tip number 12. Set number of attempts allowed to only one to ensure that students aren't able to re-access the exam outside the exam hall. Tip number 13. When you create your Moodle exam from scratch, we advise you to set browser security to full screen pop-up. This will allow you to limit students' movement within the exam. They will not be able to view the navigation menu of Moodle and move freely within the site. If the exam is restored from a previous semester, do not set this security setting because it is not compatible with restored exams. Tip number 14. For final exams, the labs are prepared to only have access for Moodle. You can use net support to block all external access. Please make sure to verify that student's ID is the same as his or her login ID. Tip number 17. No mobile phones or laptops are allowed during exams. If you need specific software, you must communicate it to ITC 1 week before the exam and assist in setting up the exam lab. Tip number 18. If you need certain websites to be blocked during the exam, you must communicate this to ITC at least 1 week before the scheduled exam date. Tip number 19 is an important and crucial tip. You must always verify that the students submitted the exam before they exit the exam hall by clicking Submit All and Finish. If they don't click Submit All and Finish, they will be able to reopen the exam attempt and alter their answer outside the exam hall. Tip number 20. Once students complete the exam, you are advised to hide the exam to ensure the security of exam questions and that grades are not published before you are ready. If any special case students are going to take the quiz, duplicate the quiz, then change the quiz time settings and name accordingly, and restrict access to the quiz based on student email. You can find instructions on how to do this by checking out our exam resources course. We will explain at the end of this webinar how to access this course. Be prepared. Make sure to take a few printed copies of your exam so that when a student faces a connectivity issue or a logging challenge, they can take the exam on paper. Exam guidelines. A few of the steps previously discussed are guidelines as stated in this email. The e-learning center will send a reminder of these guidelines during the final exam period. Please make sure to obtain these guidelines. Support request. Make sure to submit a support request to the e-learning center at least 3 days before your exam. This will ensure two things. The first thing is that an ELC staff member is always available to provide support during the exam. The second thing is that if you submit a request, we will be aware of your exam and avoid scheduling any Moodle maintenance during your exam. The ELC Mail Campus Support Request link is announced weekly. Please make sure to submit your request at least 3 working days before your exam. To request ELC support on the female campus, you must fill out the ITC support form. Net support. On the instructor PC, open an account on all students' PCs by selecting Students Toolbar from the top bar menu and selecting Login. You can send and collect students' files by selecting Send and Collect File from the top bar menu and selecting whether to send work or collect work. You can also transfer files to individual or all students by clicking File Transfer and selecting whether you want to file transfer or file distribute. By clicking on the internet icon on the left-hand side, you are able to specify which sites are allowed for students to access and which sites will be blocked from students. In addition, by clicking on the web option at the top bar menu, you are able to view students' web browsing history. You can also monitor in real time all students' activities by selecting the monitor icon on the left-hand side. From this icon, you can also enter exam passwords to students individually. You can also control access to students' USB and CD drives by clicking on the USB CD icon on the left-hand side. This brings us to the end of our presentation. We can now move on to the demonstration section. On the dashboard, to access Moodle exam resources, navigate your way to Site Home. On Site Home, scroll down bypassing all the announcements until you reach the Course Categories section. Under Course Categories, select Miscellaneous. From there, locate Online Exam Resources. Click on it. It's a self-enrollment course. As soon as you click on it, you will be enrolled. Now that you have access to the Online Exam Resources course, you can check out the different available modules such as setting up Moodle quizzes, which includes various handouts and video tutorials. You can also check the other available modules such as managing the exam, hiding final grades, and designing different question types on your exam. You can also access our YouTube channel by clicking on one of the available video links, which will redirect you to our YouTube channel. You can now subscribe to the channel and turn on notification to be notified about all our newest videos posted on the channel. Under Miscellaneous Courses, you will be able to access our other available resource, which is Moodle Faculty Resources, a self-enrollment course. All you have to do is click on the course. This course contains valuable information about all things Moodle, such as how to send messages, how to change course format, amongst other useful handouts. You can also find here steps on how to set up group and grouping assessments as discussed during this webinar. This brings us to the end of the session. Thank you for watching. We hope you have benefited from this session. Please do not hesitate to contact us for any further support through the available channel displayed on the screen.